been needing to find a new apartment, which has not been easy with credit as bad as mine. Luckily, I found cosigning.com. They connected me with a cosigner who helped me get my dream apartment for me and my dog. I just paid a small fee and was able to move in fast. Get the cosigner you need for the apartment you want. Check out cosigning.com today.
From the Twin Cities to the White House, a specific type of crime is grabbing headlines as prosecutors look to take down entire groups all at once.
The acronym is becoming well known. What is the RICO Act and how does it impact organized crime? Good question. Jeff Wagner talked with a lawyer who specializes in these cases.
From gangs on city streets.
This is historic for this state and for the work that we do.
To potential interference with election results.
The defendants engaged in a criminal racketeering enterprise.
Federal and state prosecutors are leaning on a law that marked a turning point in how criminal enterprises are dismantled.
I think it caused a reorganization of organized crime.
Jeff Grell is a University of Minnesota adjunct professor who teaches a class on RICO.
What is the RICO Act?
Technically, it stands for the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. So it's a very handy law to address large groups of people all at once under one count. And it makes it far more likely that all of those people can be tried together in one trial.
Created in 1970, RICO targeted the mafia, ensuring the leaders of these syndicates could be held responsible for up to 35 crimes, including murder, gambling, extortion, robbery, drug dealing, and money laundering.
So what RICO did is it allowed prosecutors to prosecute people who didn't get their hands bloody in the crime, but were operating and managing an enterprise, knowing that that enterprise was engaged in criminal conduct.
In Minneapolis, nearly 60 gang members are now charged in one RICO case. The massive undertaking requires collaboration between local, state, and federal agencies.
War room, sort of, like prosecutors did years ago, prosecuting the Gambino family.
In Georgia, former President Donald Trump and 18 others face RICO charges, alleging they tried to overturn the 2020 election results. While those cases grabbed the spotlight, Grell said RICO is more often invoked in civil cases involving corporations.
The Catholic Church has been a RICO defendant. Every major Fortune 500 company has been RICO defendants.
What are the penalties under the RICO Act?
The minimum sentence is 5 years, and then it can go up to 20 years.
RICO also has the power to freeze a defendant's assets before the case even gets to trial.
So that obviously assets can't be moved overseas, money can't be spent, money can't be transferred.
Jeff Wagner, WCCO News.
This is insane. The fact is, the RICO statute should not exist. It's a convenient loophole to criminalize people who there's no evidence or actually any physical proof that they've committed any crime personally. What they're saying is that it's more so just your intent or you being connected to someone else. It's kind of like, say somebody robs a bank and they use a getaway car, but an hour before you work at a tire shop and you change the tire on the car that they used to get away from a bank robbery, they could include you in a RICO now and arrest you. I'm watching the cases very, very closely with P. Diddy. I vaguely remember the details, but I do remember a lot of the R. Kelly case. I watched what they tried to do to our current president, Donald Trump, and his lawyers. And I'm noticing that they're actually coming after any and everybody with RICO charges because there is no requirement for proof. It's completely eliminated when they charge you with a RICO. So that's a normal burden of proof. Also, it violates the Constitution because you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. However, if you're charged under a RICO, you will be forced to forfeit your assets, and they can seize your bank accounts so that you can't even afford to mount a defense to defend yourself against these charges. But if you're taking away my money ahead of time, that means you're assuming that I'm guilty. I'm already being treated as if I was convicted. The RICO statute should not exist. Yesterday, do you know what they took away from the P. Diddy trial? Do you know what they were saying? The number one thing they learned about him was in a whole day of testimony? This was the scandal that he puts applesauce on his hamburgers. I think the machine, I think the beast is starving. I think it's hungry and it must be fed. When I say the beast, I mean the criminal justice system in the United States. It's a monster, a necessary monster, but a monster nonetheless. And just like any other monster in any horror film we've ever read, this monster eats people. It needs people to sustain itself. Lately, there have been a decline in criminality amongst in the country, specifically in violent crime. Let's talk about why. Once upon a time, 20 years ago, the internet was not as prominent as it is now. Now you can actually make money off the internet. When I was 18 years old, there was no Uber. There was no DoorDash. There was no way for me to do small jobs to make money and make, for odd ends. If you live in a big city, if you could not be fortunate enough to find a good job, you were literally trying to commit crimes or do something else. If you think about it, in the past 20 years, a lot of municipalities have completely, for the most part, based a lot of their city budget on revenue generated from DUI arrests. That's why when you go to cities like Scottsdale, Arizona, or certain, there are certain places that are known for just having more police damn near than people. And then they just sit outside of bars and restaurants and they pull everyone over, and everyone, especially if you're in a no tolerance state, everyone gets a DUI. Do you know how much money DUIs cost people when they get them? Tens of thousands. Who does the money go to? Lawyers, court fees. Prosecutors are also paid out of that. If you're housed in the jail, bail bondsmen. It's a complete ecosystem in the criminal justice arena. And it's only sustained by criminals. But just like what's happening with Google, and something upsets the normalcy that we've had for the past 20 years, now less people are using Google first as a search engine. People are just using AI. I'm actually reading from Google now, but we're going to read my AI answer in a minute, and the AI is more detailed. What do you do when things are upset? So right now, Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and Uber Eats have probably cut down, I would say, on roughly 40% of the usual crime that you would see. People who would normally be committing fraud or, breaking into cars or doing whatever and usually get caught, they are now doing delivery. Other people are now, instead of driving to a night spot to go get drunk and driving home themselves, people have been trained mentally now to take an Uber. What are these cities and states going to do to replace the income that is now going to be missing? Well, it should be everyone's worst nightmare. I believe they're going to actually start expanding their efforts to arrest people for petty crimes or non-existent crimes, just to get them in the system where you have to fight and participate and actually contribute to the legal system, the structure. You're going to have to feed into it. I'm noticing that they are going after anybody and they're claiming everything is a RICO. I think for one reason they're doing that is because they know that not soon before long, someone like myself will be able to argue this point to the Supreme Court, and the legal statute will have to be overturned or reformed in its current form. And there's many reasons why, but you will have to argue this because it should not be used and applied to everyday Americans. It cannot. Now, the reason that this even went through in the first place was because they were only targeting one man, and that was John Gotti. It was never meant to go after former presidents for legally challenging election results or for rich moguls in music and pretend that they're trafficking their very own girlfriend, but they're not charging anyone and no one's being held against their will. But that's a RICO. But RICO's also rappers who have friends who are felons who go out and shoot at tour buses, and they want to blame that on the biggest rapper in the group, even though he wasn't physically there. They want to pretend he was calling shots from his home. He actually never got his hands dirty, but he's still involved. Literally, just everything is so vague. I mean, even what they're considering racketeering, no one ever actually goes into detail to understand what it means. It's kind of just, depending on who's targeting you, they can come up with their own definition of what racketeering is, and hopefully they can find ways to make it stick. But they don't need to make it stick. You're not going to be able to afford a defense. They keep you locked away where they just drain you, and they hope that you get so desperate that you accept a bullshit plea and a bad offer, and you can't really defend yourself, and you just plea out to basically nothing because you're afraid of this going too far, and you end up with a 30-year sentence. You know, now that we're looking at these RICO charges, you know, because they're throwing them around so much, well, now we're starting to look at cases like R. Kelly's case, and we're saying, well, why? If he was doing all these different crimes against women and children, why did they need to charge him under the RICO? Why not just charge him regularly and prove that he did these things? It's starting to look more like there was no proof of any of these charges. You got to think about it. For the last year and a half, the television's been telling me that Diddy was a pedophile, gay, woman abusing, I mean, just beyond sex fiend. I don't even know what the name for this kind of person would be. He's basically spending about 16 of his 24-hour day raping women, men, children, handicapped, and animals. It's looking like none of that is true. We know that from the testimony from his long-term girlfriend, that he was actually doing all these things with his assistants, friends, old bodyguards, people that don't like him, people that like him. No one's once brought up him doing anything to children. And even the male escorts that he was paying over the years, none of them ever said that he did anything with them sexually. Actually, if you listen to the stories carefully, Diddy is the only one that hasn't had sex in any of the freak-offs. You know, it begs the question, how can the freakiest man on earth, allegedly, not do anything freaky at any of these sex events? It seems like it was all just a lie, and they used the media to further their lies, hoping they can poison the jury pool and get a conviction based on emotion, and it overrides the requirement of fact. Luckily, there are such things as jury instructions where they're going to tell them, hey, don't think about this, focus on this. And if they just focus on the facts, there is no conviction. I believe the machine is getting hungry, and that means they're going to expand to the rest of us. Personally, I'm already moving out of the country. I will continue to do business here, but having a life here, it's already becoming too dangerous. Not only do you have to worry about crazy people, but you have to worry about the very system that you want to uphold. If they're using RICO statutes to come after people who are actually not criminals, that means anyone is fair game. Your children, yourself, your brother, your aunt, and they can basically bring as many people into it with no evidence required. So let's go over why this is a very bad idea. Well, first things first. Recent crime statistics in the United States show a downward trend, particularly in violent crime. While there are some exceptions and variations across the different cities and regions, overall, violent and property crime rates have been decreasing. Think about what that means for the criminal justice ecosystem. It won't be able to sustain itself indefinitely. It needs more money. So what is this going to encourage the FBI and law enforcement to do? To go and find more people. Whether they're guilty or not, you have to find them. Let them come into the court and fight. At least we have bodies in the courtroom. A friend of mine said she went to court the other day and it was empty. She thought there would be more people. She said 5 years ago when she went to court for a traffic ticket, the court was flooded with people. But less and less people are even wanting to drive because everything is criminalized. Car insurance is expensive, registration is expensive, and so are DUIs. So with less people driving, there's less people actually going to court for those offenses. And that was a big part of these revenue schemes. It's really, if you think about it, it's actually fits the description of a racket in itself. It is a racket. FBI data. The FBI Crime Data Explorer, CDE, reports a significant drop in violent crime in 2003 compared to 2022, with murder and non-negligent manslaughter experienced a large decrease. Property crime, including burglary and larceny theft, also saw decreases in 2023. While not universally applicable, the national trend suggests a general decline in crime rates, although specific incidents and their impacts can vary significantly by location. Public perception versus reality. Some surveys show the majority of Americans still perceive crime rates as increasing, even when the data indicates a decline. Over a longer time frame, such as 93 to 2022, both violent and property crime rates have seen substantial decreases. I think I'm right. I think the reason you see that there's a RICO charge against Puff Daddy, and even the judge said, I don't see anything indicating a RICO. Why they went after Trump. They actually just announced another RICO charge for some other prominent figure. Actually, let's see here if we can look up the names of these other RICO. Okay. So famously, you had the Young Thug YSL. That entire RICO fell apart. No one was sentenced. Young Thug actually got out and he took a probation charge that he didn't have to charge. He didn't have to take. Now, they said the first time there's ever been a RICO conviction where there was only one man in the RICO, the first time that ever happened in history was R. Kelly. So basically, he was his own one-man enterprise. You know, I think if we go back through this, and he was convicted in 2022. I think if we go back through this case and pull it apart, there was never any evidence against R. Kelly. But the thing is, when they had the public on their side, they really just convicted him in the court of public opinion, and they knew nobody would protest or make a big deal about it, and they got away with it. Famously, Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani in August of 2023. Look at these dates. They just started using this heavy-handedly recently. Fannie Willis also just literally putting RICOs on anybody she can, multiple RICO charges in one county alone. Obviously, there's something wrong with this. She filed charges against the Georgia State RICO Act against Trump and Rudy Giuliani, his lawyer, for alleged racketeering schemes related to the 2020 election. They never actually go over what racketeering means. Enron and Arthur Anderson. The Enron scandal involved white-collar crimes like falsified financial statements, was prosecuted using RICO. Gang-related RICO charges. And then it really initially started in the 80s against the Gambino crime family and the other mafia families, because they never actually had evidence that the big guys, the main people that were in New Jersey and other states, were actually calling the shots in Vegas. So what they did was they said, well, there doesn't need to be evidence. All we need now is 1 or 2 people to say you did something, and that's going to now count as proof. And because they were only going after the mafia, nobody brought up how that's unconstitutional and wrong, and nobody really fought it. But now that it's starting to be spread out, it's not used against everyone. I do think that them trying to use it against Trump was biting off more than they can chew. But now going after celebrities and all these random people, I think they're just trying to bring as many people into the system, whether they're going to be convicted or not as possible. Doesn't really matter. I think they're just trying to get more bodies in these courtrooms because otherwise they would be empty and there would be no revenue being generated. It's all a game. It's all a game and they want money. This is crazy. That's where we are right now, where now you're going to be targeted in America. Think about it. They're talking about the PPP loans. Some of these people had loans as small as $8,000. And they're literally going after them heavy-handed, offering these people 20-year sentences. But then they plead out and they get probation or something small, but they have to pay these court fees. They have to pay for lawyers. They're basically just feeding the ecosystem. And even people that actually follow the rules and had accountants are now being dragged into court and accused of wire fraud and PPP fraud. I have a good friend of mine who's actually fighting a case with that right now. And he did everything he was supposed to by the book. But they're dragging him in. And they actually got him in a RICO. They're saying that he knows some guys in a whole nother city and they did something and they killed somebody or something. And they're saying that even though he wasn't there and they know he didn't do that, he's connected to them because I think his phone number was in one of their phones. And they're just putting out a drag net. And when you go to court for your first court date, you don't even have to pay a bond because they know there's nothing against you. They just need people in these courts. These courts are starting to become empty because less people are making a life of crime. Because in this day and age, there's surveillance everywhere. You're not going to get away with anything. So why would you want to do crime for a living? It doesn't make sense. I fear for Americans. RICO, passed in 1970, was originally used to combat organized crime. While its intent was to bring down mafia-style enterprises, it has become a powerful and controversial tool used in both criminal and civil cases that range from different range and targets from cases, from gang members to CEOs, rappers, and even political figures. The legal loophole in RICO, for one, that means you're guilty by association. RICO allows the government to prosecute individuals not necessarily for committing a crime themselves, but for being associated with an enterprise that committed patterns of crimes. Patterns of crime. So not any specific particular crime, a pattern of crimes. And even if you're not doing it personally, you're associated with a group that is like, do you understand how vague and psychotic all of this is? It literally tells you nothing. A pattern of racketeering. Prosecutors only need to show 2 predicate acts. For example, wire fraud, drug trafficking, bribery, over a 10-year span to establish a pattern. 10 years? These don't even have to be directly connected. They can just have the same enterprise. And that's a very vague and easily manipulated standard. It is. Pretrial punishment and asset seizures. The government can freeze your assets before trial, denying you the ability to pay for a legal defense. This gives them a huge leverage advantage. I'll be honest with you. If I'm trying to save my industry that pays me, then I would literally only charge everybody under the RICO. That way I can just seize all of their funds. They can't make a defense. And then they would just have to plead out and go to jail because they don't have a choice. Vague definitions of enterprise and conspiracy. The definitions of an enterprise is so broad that it can include rap groups, a church, or even a social circle. a social circle can be considered an enterprise or a conspiracy. If you had any communication with others that are charged, prosecutors can build a conspiracy case around your intent, not just your actions. So basically, pre-con. You're intending to do this next month. We're going to arrest you today. That's pre-crime. None of this is constitutional, and none of this should be allowed. And I think somebody like myself is going to be able to argue this, and it's going to have to go. Why RICO is arguably unconstitutional? Well, first things first, it undermines the presumption of innocence. Because how are you innocent when RICO allows a massive criminal charge without proving individual acts beyond a reasonable doubt? Only association or indirect involvement is necessary. So they don't have to actually have you doing anything. You just got to be associated with somebody who did. It violates your 5th and 14th Amendment due process. Defendants can lose their property and freedom without full due process. Asset forfeiture before convictions also violates the constitutional right to be presumed innocent. Wow. So they can seize your property even before a conviction. How is that even constitutional? You didn't even prove I did anything wrong, but you can take my property and hold it and just until you feel like giving it back. It violates the 6th Amendment, the right to counsel, because they can freeze your assets. That means you can't access them to pay counsel. You can't even get a lawyer, which undermines your right to a fair trial. It also encourages prosecutorial overreach. Prosecutors can use RICOs to charge people with crimes they couldn't normally find proof using the standard evidentiary rules. That is the biggest thing on why they're going after all of these celebrities, presidents, whatever. I'll say it again. Prosecutorial overreach. Prosecutors use the RICO charge for people with crimes they could not normally prove by using the standard evidentiary standards. Basically, if there's no proof or no evidence that this person is guilty or of anything, you can still prosecute them. And you don't need evidence anymore. So there's no burden of proof required. Like, this is fucking crazy. Why it shouldn't exist in its current form. It's weaponized against political opponents, expensive to fight, easy to abuse, and it turns a civil case into a criminal witch hunt. Even when the charges are dropped or overturned, your reputation is ruined and your life is destroyed from the allegations alone. Bottom line is, a RICO is no longer a statute. It's a legal trap that relies on guilty by association, a low threshold of proof, and government overreach. Its existence in its current form violates core constitutional protections, and it should be repealed or severely reformed. Otherwise, it remains a legal loophole used to bypass the burden of proof, the very thing that separates justice from tyranny. Now, I told the AI what I was looking for, and it broke everything down. This is something that people need to know, and a lot of people don't know. They don't know. I try to share, make these videos so that we can, talk about these things, but people just don't know what they're facing. And that's why I've already moved to another country, not full time, but I will work there. But living a life here, it's like you're basically just waiting for something to happen. And it's very dangerous. And if they're going after these people with no evidence, you don't stand a chance. Anybody can come after you. You say the wrong thing on the internet, you piss off the wrong politician or business owner, who knows, and they can literally target you and go after you. Shit, the court costs alone. I mean, that tells you that these courts need money and they need people. And RICO is their fastest way to get as many people into these courts as possible. It needs to be done away with. I know it's their hustle, but they're going to have to do away with this because, this malicious, unconstitutional prosecution of innocent people for the sole purpose of generating income for these failing court systems, it can't be allowed. It's unconstitutional and it's wrong. Like and subscribe, share the video. Just want to talk about what the RICO Act means. I'll be back on with another story to go over this whole Megan Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you.
I've been needing to find a new apartment, which has not been easy with credit as bad as mine. Luckily, I found cosigning.com. They connected me with a cosigner who helped me get my dream apartment for me and my dog. I just paid a small fee and was able to move in fast. Get the cosigner you need for the apartment you want. Check out cosigning.com today.